Good afternoon to you. 5:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. And boy, we have a lot of it. Coming up at 5:30, Philip Lenczycki joins us from the Daily Caller News Foundation with an updated report on how the Chinese Communist Party is infiltrating the United States. And they're doing it, of course, right in line with the Biden agenda. The details on that ahead. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We'll be happy to have you with us on a Friday. Let's check in on the phones. Our buddy Jason in Kensington is calling in on line one. Jason, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, g'day, Vince. How you going, mate?
I'm doing all right. Jason, what's on your mind today?
Oh, yeah, just about your immigration laws. And, I mean, when I moved here, so like 30-odd years ago, I mean, the government sort of went out of its way to sort of make sure you are who you are, and of course, health certificates and the legalities I had to go through. I mean, I probably paid anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000 in legal fees just to process all the paperwork. And then, of course, they go through making sure that you sort of took the right route to get here. And, I mean, that they've sort of just went out of their way. And if you're doing it legally, it's 10 times tougher than if you just ran across the border. And this is what sort of gets me, is that the people who are sort of in line to do that, they're getting held up by the people who are pushing in front, doing it illegally. And it costs everyone in the long run. And I think that the government purposely does this because I think people who come here legally, the good chances are they're probably going to, they're not going to be all of them, Democrat voters. I'm guessing they're probably going to say, I hate dealing with government, and more than likely they might be sort of swayed the other way. And I'm guessing that they probably sort of hold these people that come across illegally to sort of I don't know what you call it, a ransom to sort of, we let you in, so you vote for us.
Right. Yeah. Well, look, if you hit the lottery, if somebody comes along and says, hey, I'm giving you American citizenship for free, you'd feel kind of indebted to them, wouldn't you? You'd be like, well, maybe I should vote for that guy.
Exactly. And, because I had a green card originally, and I held that you have to have that for about 5 years before you can get your citizenship. And the only reason I did that was because my green card was actually stolen, which I kind of was still looking for a Hispanic guy running around with a blonde wig on. But it was funny because we had it was actually easier to get citizenship than it was to get my green card back, so I ended up processing my citizenship only because I could do it, and the Australian government wasn't going to rescind my Australian citizenship. But
Got it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But this is an insult. I mean, this idea that illegals could jump to the front of the line when you did all the right things, and it's not just you. There's so many immigrants, 1 million a year actually, who come into the United States legally. It's just a middle finger to all of them for doing it the right way and honoring this country and respecting its borders and and becoming a part of it by putting in the hard work.
Yeah, and you don't mind going through that because you have to have a system where you vet people just so you know who they are.
Yeah,
and we don't mind doing that. But then again, everyone else do the same thing. It's unfair.
It's wild. Well, you're not the only immigrant I've heard say that, but I always appreciate the phone calls, Jason. It's nice to talk to you. Please have a great Labor Day weekend, sir.
Hey, you too, mate. Thanks a lot.
All right, let me take a phone call from Frank in Gaithersburg on line 3. Frank, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, Frank.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Great. Go for it. You're on the air.
Hey, look, I got a friend who lives in Seattle, and I spoke to him today, and I think he's like 1 million of Americans that don't know anything about the Biden scandal. Mm-hmm. He knew nothing about it. It's amazing.
So how did the conversation go? How did you figure out that he knew absolutely nothing?
Because he asked me how Trump was doing. And I said, Trump, what about your guy? And he knew nothing about it. Not a word.
Isn't it amazing?
If you don't watch Fox or News Nation, nobody knows nothing. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's the media's doing. They cut people off and then they don't tell them anything about what's actually happening. Frank, so your buddy is your buddy going to do some research now, or is he that wedded to the cause that he's refusing to even learn?
He's retired, so I told him, why don't you sit on the couch and watch an hour of Fox and see where your head's at tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Nobody knows nothing.
Amazing. Nobody knows nothing. Thanks, Frank. It's a good call and a good point. And it actually is a perfect segue into this next issue, which is you've got a Washington Post writer this week Philip Bump is his name. I kind of like that. I think it describes him well. He's, his look always throws me off because I see him on Twitter every so often, and he looks like Andy Richter, like the sidekick from Conan O'Brien's show. That's kind of his look, the kind of goofy glasses. Yeah, so he did a podcast interview this week, and you know who's been all over him is Jonathan Turley, the attorney. And Turley, who has just been so good on so many issues, just pointing out what's actually happening in our country, from everything from the legal abuses to the censorship of the big tech companies to the lies that the media tell us. Turley's been all over this guy Philip Bump's case. And he wrote a piece recently. It was published, on the 29th of August, just a few days ago. And it was headlined, Washington Post stands by Philip Bump's claims on Lafayette Park, the Hunter Biden laptop, and other controversial claims. And I'm not going to read the whole piece to you, but I'll just summarize here what basically Philip Bump has asserted over the years and that the Washington Post continues to defend, even though some of their own reporting has actually undermined this entirely. Turley says that the Post has clarified that it is standing by the claims that, one, Lafayette Park was cleared for a photo op. That was untrue. That Bill Barr lied about the use of tear gas. He did not. The Hunter Biden laptop was seeded by Russian intelligence with false information. That is false. There was never any spying of the FBI on the Trump campaign. That is belly laugh false. And the Clinton campaign did not create and foster the false Russian collusion claims. That is roll on the floor laughing false. All of that is false. So Philip Bump has just gotten away with lying through the years and has never gone back and issued corrections on any of his pieces. And so Turley goes through the history here, and good for him for doing the work. Just goes through the history, goes, this guy has so many untruthful things on his blog or whatever for this website that claims that democracy dies in darkness. So that leads us to this week. This columnist, Philip Bump, just did an interview with a guy. I'm sorry to say, I'm not familiar with him. He's a podcaster and the owner of the Comedy Cellar. His name's Noam Dworman. I'm familiar with him now. And Eddie Scarry summarizes their interactions this week this way. His headline is, Washington Post's Philip Bump embarrasses himself while defending Joe Biden's corruption. He writes, imagine not knowing the difference between proof and evidence, plus retaining a voice 2 octaves above a normal man, and you'll have a decent idea of what it's like to be Philip Bump. What an unbelievable lead sentence. Bump is the Washington Post writer, quote, focused largely on the numbers behind politics, end quote, according to his bio. But he's most recently known for letting his ass hang out on the internet by way of a highly embarrassing interview with podcaster and Comedy Cellar owner Noam Dworman. In the interview, Dworman tells Bump that he wanted to talk with the, quote, smartest person who disagrees with him on the significance of the Joe Biden corruption saga as it relates to Biden's son Hunter. After an hour of innocuous questions from Dworman, Bump called the affair, quote, a setup, and then walked out. Wild. But during that hour, it was remarkable how frequently, in utter despair, Bump pleaded for Dworman to offer him, quote, evidence that the president is or was directly involved in his son's comically unfathomable foreign business operation. Dworman conceded that every exhibit he had to offer was simply evidence rather than ironclad proof before playing clips of Hunter's former business partners, citing congressional testimony, and reading from written communications, all of which indicate that Joe Biden not only knew but was a cognizant player in his son's dealings. And those dealings worth millions were made possible purely by nature of the Bidens having high-level U.S. government influence via Joe having been a longtime senator and then a 2-term vice president. The evidence, Eddie Scarry writes, is overwhelming. Even if nobody calls it, quote, proof, it is irrefutable. Let me pause here for a moment. I started the show talking about this detail, and I want to pick it up again, that the media keep insisting that there is no direct evidence, they even say evidence, or proof that Joe Biden benefited from his son's business arrangements. It is garbage. The evidence is, as Eddie Scarry says, and as I've been saying, overwhelming. You have business partner after business partner. You have congressional testimony. You have the FBI's FD 1023 form. That is a trusted government source paid by American taxpayers for many years, who has come in and said it is absolutely a bribery arrangement between Burisma in Ukraine and the Biden family, including Joe Biden, who's on 2 phone recordings with Lenczycki, the head of Burisma, discussing the bribe to get Victor Shokin fired. You have Victor Shokin, who just did an interview this past week with Brian Kilmeade, insisting he believes that the Bidens were absolutely being bribed in order to get him canned. How much? This is all, again, this is all evidence. Evidence, evidence, evidence. This is the kind of thing you would use in a criminal trial. What does that witness have to say? That's part of the evidence. Back to Eddie here. Proof would be a video or audio recording of Biden and his son discussing the details of their shakedown schemes. To date, that's not known to exist. Well, actually, it could exist if the FD 1023 form is correct about these recordings with Lenczycki. That may very well exist. But that audio has not yet been made public. Plenty of other audio has been, though, including Biden hassling the former leader of Ukraine about firing Viktor Shokin, and that leader of Ukraine responding, Poroshenko, saying, he hasn't done anything wrong, but we fired him anyway because we don't want to get this money from you, the $1 billion loan guarantee. Proof would be testimony that the former vice president signed contracts with his son's business associates. To date, that's not known to exist. Proof would be at least a photo of Biden with his son's clients. Wait, never mind. That last one actually does exist, says Eddie Scary. My fault. Yeah, there's plenty of photos like that. And, of course, we know that he had dinner at Cafe Milano multiple times in Washington, D.C. with the business partners. All the while, Bump said over and over that none of it was, quote, evidence, when if he were a smart person, he would have said none of it was, quote, proof. You have no evidence that Joe Biden acted on Hunter Biden's behalf or that Joe Biden took money. Find me evidence. There is none. You've offered no evidence beyond your parsing. This conversation is silly. This is why I keep saying it's silly. Curiously, Bump would, at times throughout the interview, reject anything Dworman said with the declaration that Dworman, quote, refused to engage with the contradictory broader evidence. Anyway, so Philip Bump squirming as he's being asked by the head of a comedy club to just talk about Joe Biden's corruption. Like, hey, can you answer this question? What does this mean? What does this mean? Here's the, you want to hear the end of the interview? Of course you do. Here is the audio of Philip Bump being asked what he thinks about Hunter Biden's real text message, genuinely found on Hunter Biden's laptop, where he complains that he has to cover his father's expenses, that he's giving half of his income to his dad. He's complaining about this, that Pop keeps taking all my money. Here's the exchange. And listen, if you were a journalist, you would indicate your interest in this story. If you're a left-wing hack, you would try and destroy any conversation about it.
What do you take from the text message to his adult daughter, Hunter's text message, I have to give 50% of my income to Pop?
I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means.
Well,
I know it's circumstantial evidence, and you prefer that.
No, what could it mean?
I have no idea.
But doesn't it?
I don't know.
Well,
I appreciate your.
Has anybody asked her?
I don't know. I don't know.
Don't you think somebody should ask her?
Okay. Like I'm not. I just said I don't know, and I don't know what to make of it, so I have nothing to say about it.
Yeah,
what
but
do you want me to say?
Yeah, but you say there's no evidence, but then there's a text message where he says, "I give Pop 50% of my money." That's evidence.
Okay. Well, okay, fine.
It's, by the way, you saw the little feint that Philip Bump does. Well, it's circumstantial evidence. It's not direct evidence. No, dummy. It's direct evidence. It's specific. It's Hunter Biden saying that he's giving his money to his dad on a text message that we know exists and is authenticated.
So
it's evidence. I appreciate you having me on.
It doesn't. That something like that. Who do you think is more? I listen to that and I'm saying,
Am I?
You can free to go.
I feel you want me to leave, like just walk out in the middle of this because that way you can
you can go.
Right.
Is this a standard? Really, this is the way the Washington Post handles people who disagree with them.
When I agree to be on for 45 minutes,
go,
and then I get on for an hour and 15. Yeah, that after a while I go.
And now he whips his headphones off and he walks out of the room. That's the conclusion of the interview. The guy says, "Just go, just go." Yeah, and he's complaining about the amount of time. I can't believe I spent all this time here. And the reason he's grumpy about the time he spent there is because he's being asked to account for his crappy coverage, his deceit, and his failure to cover the basics of the Biden scandal. That's it. Just cover it at all. And he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to. It was David Burge, Iowa Hawk Blog, I think is it. I get his handle wrong sometimes, but David Burgess is his name. He said years ago, kind of famously now. I love this. Journalism means covering a story with a pillow until it stops breathing. That's what the Washington Post's Philip Bump is trying to do. Cover the Biden story with a pillow until it stops breathing. 5:22 now. Earlier in the program, we had a question of whether or not illegal aliens are actually accounted for by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The answer to that, according to our in-house economist, E.J. Antoni, is no, they are not. They say on their website, it is likely that both surveys of workers include at least some undocumented immigrants. They lie. They undocumented. It's such a lie. Do they have any paperwork whatsoever? If you do, you're documented. However, neither the establishment nor the household survey is designed to identify the legal status of workers. Therefore, it is not possible to determine how many are counted in either survey. They do identify that they're foreign-born. That's how the surveys work, but they don't indicate legal or illegal, or as they say, undocumented. What a complete and total scam. Mark is in Virginia Beach on line 5, wants to weigh in on Joe Biden and the communist state of China. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Vince, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, sir.
I'm going to change it up. I'm going to change it up just a little bit. Here is a pun, if you will, and something to think about. We may never get the end goal of impeaching Joe Biden. We may never get there because, one, he's old. Two,
he might beat us to it, yeah.
If he dies before he has an opportunity to pardon his son may be holding the bag as the bag man, after all.
Yeah, no, these are good points. Hunter's probably working overtime to find some sort of new age therapy to keep the old man alive. He's got to stay alive long enough for the pardon. Hadn't contemplated that. Thanks, Mark. That's a good point. Coming up, we're going to talk to Philip Lenczycki about how Joe Biden has opened the door to the communist Chinese, and he's using, quote, green energy to bring in all that red. Well, good afternoon to you. It is 5:34 here at Newstalk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today. 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. You see these headlines on the way that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to wield influence in the United States, but sometimes you see one of these, and you start to get used to them, kind of roll off the back. But then sometimes you see one, and you're like, what is going on? What is happening to our country? The communists are very interested in green energy. And in fact, there is a new Michigan battery plant, 2 of them that are being set up, which are controlled by the Chi-Coms. That's great. Michigan is building battery plants that are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. For more on this story, the man who broke the news joins us now, Philip Lenczycki, investigative reporter for the Daily Caller News Foundation. Philip, good afternoon to you.
Comrade Vince, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing great, sir. Tell me, what the heck's going on here? The Chinese Communist Party controls our battery plants now?
Gosh, yeah. So we've been following the story a little bit, and what we found is that there are 923 members of the Chinese Communist Party in the employ of an organization called Goshen High Tech, which is from China's Anhui province, and they are the parent company of Goshen Inc., which is headquartered in Fremont, California, and as you said, is trying to build these battery plants in Big Rapids, Michigan. So not only is the parent company employing 923 members of the Chinese Communist Party, but one of those individuals happens to be the Chinese parent company's head, their CEO. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle, which is, I suppose, where the hilarity begins, is that the head of this company in China has been personally leading some trips for employees, field trips. And while it remains unclear if he led the trips that I'm about to describe, they certainly occurred on his watch. In 2021, in the summer there, in July and August, there were 2 trips that the company held for employees, during which time the employees were wearing Red Army uniforms, so matching blue uniforms with red hats, as though, they're pulled right out of, central casting for some movie from the 1960s with Mao. And they went on these long hikes. They sort of reenacted the infamous Long March. They learned Red Army songs. They visited Red Army shrines. And finally, they then pledged allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party at a memorial. So we found photos and video of that.
So these are employees of the company, which is now going to be building battery plants in Michigan.
That's correct.
Okay, and in the video, I have some of the audio. I want to play it for people. Of course, it's in Chinese, but I'll play a little bit so you can kind of get the feel for what it sounds like, and then I can read this transcript here. Take a listen. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. And I'll read in English what it says here. It says the following: I volunteered to join the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, uphold the party's platform, observe the provisions of the party's bylaws, carry out a member's duties, carry out the party's decisions, strictly observe the party's discipline, be loyal to the party, work hard, to fight for communism as long as I live, be ready at all times to sacrifice everything for the party and people, and never betray the party. Philip, that's pretty comprehensive, their commitment to the communist cause.
It is. There was one interesting glaring omission in the line. There's one line that was sort of towards the end that they didn't say, which was to guard the party's secrets, that I noticed that they didn't say. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but either way, yes, quite comprehensive, and it should really concern us that this organization behind these battery plants are, pushing this.
So when a company like this comes into the United States and tries to set up shop in one of our states, in this case, Michigan, my understanding is typically the federal government has to sign off on this, right? I mean, isn't that a component of this? What role has the Biden administration played?
I'm not an attorney, so I don't know exactly what has to happen, but my understanding is that the Biden administration did review this, and we know that it's been reported that the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, she was supportive of this plan. So it seems as though it's gotten the green light from the powers that be, at least on the side of our Democratic colleagues.
Well, this is, if I go back to one of your colleagues, your colleagues at the Daily Car News Foundation, Jake Smith, reported in June, to your point, that the Biden administration definitely did sign off on this company building these plants in Michigan. That's a part of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, decided that to give it the green light. This is the Biden administration saying, yes, you can do this. But my impression would be that the reason we even involve the federal government in these questions is to try and prevent, say, a Communist Party-controlled company from having a foothold in the United States.
You'd think that would be what they were there for. What we've seen, though, in our investigations again and again and again is that when you would imagine that would be the case, when they should review an individual's background and whatnot, and when a humble reporter can find something either the government is unable to or finds it and then is mum on it. So I'm not really sure what to make of it either. This was just sitting there, what I've just described to you was sitting there right on their website. So it didn't take a super sleuth to figure out.
Yeah, and I have to believe that there's a lot of this going on. I know that there's a lot of this going on in the country all over the place that doesn't have such theatrical evidence to support it.
Clearly, that's the case. And what's really concerning, speaking of CFIUS and whatnot, is that I can tell you from my perch right now, this isn't the end of the story. we have more to reveal that was, more or less hiding in plain sight on their website or elsewhere. And it's far more concerning. What we've shown here, I think everyone suspected that there were members of the Chinese Communist Party there, given that I believe the Midwesterner, an outlet from Michigan, had reported that the head of the organization was a member of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, a Chinese government agency. So there was some sense that this was out there. The dressing up in the garb, that's, icing on the cake. But what else has yet to be reported that, we're sitting on here is actually super concerning.
Wow.
And I'll show a little skin, and that's that, there could be ties to, Chinese influence operations and or even the Chinese military. So folks should be looking into this, and the Chinese, the U.S. government should really, step up its game.
So let me back up for a moment. The battery plants that we're talking about, these are for electric vehicle batteries, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if the Chinese Communist Party controls the development of electric vehicle batteries, as they already do, by the way, we import so much of that from China. But here in the United States, the means for espionage are sort of built into that process, aren't they? I mean, if the Chinese military has a hand in this, the extent to which they could spy on and even control American technology seems pretty high.
It's an interesting question, and what other folks have raised concerns about is that in the general vicinity of the proposed site for these two facilities in Big Rapids, Michigan, is the National Guard, the largest National Guard outpost in the United States, Camp Grayling, I believe. And as we've seen in other states, there's been some pushback when a Chinese entity has tried to purchase land close to military installations.
Yes.
So that is somewhat curious, without knowing even any more. That already is concerning. Yeah.
Philip, let me ask you. This video you have of these employees in China making a pledge to the Communist Party, saying that they will strictly observe the party's discipline, be loyal to the party. They will fight for communism as long as they live, be willing to sacrifice everything, never betray the party. All of that. Is this commonplace among Chinese workers? Are they expected to make this pledge on a routine basis?
No. This is something unique. Last time I was on your show, I believe we were talking about sort of the militarization of kindergartens, if you recall.
Right.
And so there's certainly been an uptick in this type of rhetoric and even maybe the theatrics and whatnot under Xi Jinping. But no, this is something unique, and I'm led to believe that these individuals were actually in that moment becoming members of the Chinese Communist Party, or some already were that were leading the trips and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they're not just pretending. This is for real.
But what that tells us, though, is that when you stand up, if you're a company like this, a Chinese company whose employees have made a pledge to the Communist Party, an undying pledge to the Communist Party, what that reveals is that any of their activities by their U.S. subsidiaries are already suspicious, because any action they take, including when they make claims to the American public that everything's on the up and up, they have nothing to worry about, well, that's garbage if your senior leadership have all made pledges to the Communist Party of China, and you say that you're willing to sacrifice everything for that cause.
You got it. And as I mentioned before, they left out, for whatever reason, one of the core promises in that oath, which is to protect the secrets of the Chinese Communist Party. When you take that and you couple it with some of the other laws that have been passed under Xi Jinping, for instance, just recently there have been some laws regarding espionage that have gotten some headlines.
Yeah. That
he's more or less made it so that every citizen in China is compelled by the government to cooperate with China's espionage work. This is really, to your point, extremely concerning because they are totally beholden to that power and will be forced, they'll be coerced to do its bidding if they don't do it of their own free will.
Okay, let me, if you'll indulge me, Philip Lenczycki, we have a caller from Michigan who wants to make a point. This is Cam calling in from Michigan right now. Cam, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Vince. Look, I listened to your guest, and he's making great points about the Goshen plant, which is widely opposed up here. But here's a tie-in, perhaps, because he did mention the Chinese military. Our governor is trying to militarize our state. She wants to expand the Camp Grayling facility, which is the largest National Guard Reserve training facility in the U.S., to more than double its size, which would make it even larger than Fort Hood, which is the largest. And I'm a retired Army, too, so I know a little bit about this. Fort Hood is the largest military installation in the world. And she wants to expand our facility up here. And one of the big reasons is so that they can allow contractors to come in here and test all kinds of equipment at a rate much cheaper than what they can do at, say, Aberdeen Proving Grounds or some of the other facilities around the country. And they're doing things like increasing the air sorties up here on the bombing range to like 800%. They're just expanding the training up here, and like I said, they're trying to more than double their land footprint up here.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of speculation. You know what? The government doesn't give you any information. People speculate. There's a lot of speculation that there's going to be some Chinese military activity up here.
Cam, thank you for that call. And Philip, let me turn back to you on this. I mean, the reality here is that regardless of whatever underhanded or public intent Gretchen Whitmer might have, if you're doubling the size of this National Guard camp, Camp Grayling, and it's right in vicinity of a Chinese Communist Party-controlled technology company, that's deeply worrisome.
Absolutely. I had not heard what the caller, Cam, had said, so that's something interesting to look into. What I've heard is that at Camp Grayling, they have occasionally had some soldiers come in actually from Taiwan to do some exercises there, which would potentially be an interesting thing to eavesdrop on if you were, working for the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes.
But to Cam's point, if Camp Grayling were to expand in any direction, then that would make it, only closer to this facility, this proposed facility. And in the cases of some of the other projects across the country that have met opposition, when folks have sort of scratched their heads and said, I don't see what the big deal is, I've heard people respond and say, well, you have to understand that, when it comes to intercepting, communications and things like that, having, a radius of some given, mileage is good enough. So it doesn't have to be that they can, see you through binoculars. It could be that their sensors can pick up what you're, broadcasting.
Yes, it's so funny. I'm so glad you're on and you were able to respond to that, because I was looking to kind of accent what you just shared with us about the Taiwanese military training at Camp Grayling. There was a report earlier this year in the Wall Street Journal that the Michigan National Guard has been training a contingent of the Taiwanese military, directly to what you said, including during annual exercises with multiple countries at Camp Grayling in northern Michigan. So that starts to stitch some of this together. The Chinese Communist Party's interest in this particular spot in the country must be immense. And you're looking at them as they invest or whatever, as they control this battery firm that's being built in Michigan. Now, with the blessing of the Biden administration, you just can't make it up, Philip.
No, this is very concerning, and I think the point that you made earlier is the one that I'd want to leave folks with, and that's that while in this case we've got the really colorful image takeaway of these individuals wearing their party uniforms or the Red Army uniforms, there's probably dozens or maybe hundreds more of other instances where they're flying under the radar still, and that we should be increasingly cognizant of that.
Philip Lenczycki, please keep up the excellent work over at the Daily Caller News Foundation. Appreciate your support, your time today. Thank you, sir. Vivek Ramaswamy put an NBA All-Star dunk competition together on Andrea Mitchell's face this week.
Talk about the hurricane that is now approaching. You've called climate change and that agenda a hoax. You said more people are dying from bad climate change policies than there are of actual climate change. But according to a UN agency, extreme weather events compounded by climate change caused the death of 2 million people between 1970 and 2021. Can you offer a shred of evidence that more than 2 million people died from converting to clean energy?
I can offer clear evidence that the number of climate disaster-related deaths is down by 98% over the last century. The number of people who died of hurricanes, tornadoes, heat waves, and other weather-related events in 1920, for every 100 that died then, 2 die today. And the reason why is more plentiful, abundant access to fossil fuels and technology powered by fossil fuels. I can also tell you today, it is a hard fact, none of these things are disputed. 8 times as many people die of cold temperatures than die of warm ones. The right answer to all temperature-related deaths is more plentiful, abundant access to fossil fuels. The Earth is covered by more green surface area today than it was half a century or a century ago.
She doesn't even know what to do.
Because carbon dioxide is plant food. And carbon dioxide as a percentage of the atmosphere is still at a relative low through human history. Those are
he gave her the backhand and the front hand. He just boom, boom. To Andrea Mitchell, let her have the weekend off, will you? So she has time to recover. Good for Vivek. You know, this guy, that guy knows how to do it, right? More candidates need to sound like him. Just say it, baby. Be proud and defend people, humanity. Great approach. All right, the great one, Mark Levin, up next right here on WMAL.